is Shannon Brinkley. I am a quilt and fabric designer, as well as a teacher and author of my fun and unique raw edge applique technique, scrappy applique. So I'm going to take you through that today. Scrappy applique is a raw edge applique technique where you're essentially collaging the fabric to create your applique piece. You can work with small scraps of fabric, a great way to use up those fabric scraps, or you can start with larger pieces of fabric, a fat quarter, a fat eighth, something like that. A lot of different fabrics will lend themselves really well to create this mosaic texture. I love starting with a really simple silhouette and then just filling that with a really rich, interesting kind of mosaic texture with my fabric. So let's talk about different fabrics that work well in a collage. I like to start with a monochromatic palette. So I will, for example, here we have blues, and I'll start with a lot of monochromatic prints. So mono meaning one, chromatic color. So fabrics that read as mostly one color, all together with different values. So some darks, some lights, some tone on tones work really well. I like to throw in a couple solids as well as a batik or two. Even if you don't often use batiks in your quilting, they can really add some nice dimension to a collage. So these monochromatic prints work beautifully in the collage, and then I'll often throw in a print that, like this one, has a lot of blues in it, so it's going to blend really well with the rest of these fabrics. But because it also has these other pops of color, it's going to add a lot of interest to your collage. So then you can either just stop there, like I did with some of these sweet guys, or then you can perhaps stay on the same side of the color wheel and add in, so here I have these mints, I have some chartreuse thrown in there. Here you could jump over and add a gold. I love putting in a neutral to add some interest. And then one type of fabric to be really deliberate with how you use are these fabrics with a lot of negative space, a white background. So they will tend to break up your collage quite a bit, so just be really intentional with it. I wouldn't use more than one, maybe two of these types of fabrics in your collage. Okay, so let's start collaging. So we are gonna start with either scrap fabric or, like I said, a fat quarter, fat eighth, and you put fusible web on the back of that fabric and then cut it down into whatever shapes you like. And then I am doing my collage on this parchment paper that will transfer to this fusible web. So you just start collaging. I'm doing one of these sweet little robot guys. So we're gonna collage. I always tell my students, don't overthink this step, just begin, have fun with it. All right, and I just try to distribute the values, the colors relatively evenly. Make sure you filled in all of your little holes. There we go. All right, so that looks pretty good. You can kind of shift things around if you like. Okay, and then just gonna press. Let's move this over here. And that is gonna transfer that pencil image from the parchment paper to the back of my collage, and then you cut it out, and we fuse it then to some kind of background. You could do a solid piece of fabric, you could do a piece background, there's lots of different options there. And then there's lots of different options as far as finishing. I love finishing it with a clear thread, a monofilament, transparent thread, and I am going to free motion top stitch around all of these raw edges to tack them down. All right, let's take this to the sewing machine. Okay, so I have my free motion open toe foot on. I have clear thread And over my clear thread, I have a thread net just to help it to feed through more evenly. And I have a bobbin weight thread in my bobbin. That's my favorite type of thread to use when I am using the clear thread on top. All right, so I'm gonna do this really similarly to how you would free motion quilt, but this is just on the quilt top. All right, so you're gonna lock stitch. And I'm just going around these raw edges. I'm using free motion because it's nice and fast. I'm not having to pivot at every single corner. And you can have your needle in any position, but I am just going to move it over to the center so that it's not so close to the edge of my foot. And this is all done on your applique piece. You can retrace over stitches you've already made. My favorite needle size to use is a size 70 because it helps to keep really tiny holes. And I'll be finishing this with a satin stitch, so I'm not gonna worry so much about going around the outside edges. I'm just doing the raw edges in the center of my applique piece. And I have done all of it except for I noticed there's another line here, so I'm just gonna retrace over my stitches and get that line. And same with this one right here. All right, so it looks like I've done all of it. I'm just gonna end on the edge and back stitch. Okay. All right. So now the sky is all top stitch, so I would just finish it with a satin stitch or whatever your favorite applique stitch would be. Let's talk about some of the fabric choices that I made with a few of these quilts that I brought along with me. So here with these sweet little robot lovers here, I have all of these golds, and then I threw in a little pop of this teal to just add a little bit of a pop of interest, and I have these blacks too, which I think your eye is really drawn to. It makes it a bit more interesting. Here too, I have a lot of these dark aquas all in here, but then this pop of this white and black neutral that really draws your eye in. I have here lots of these fun mints with these pops of gold and chartreuse, some black. And here we have lots of these blues with purples and turquoise all on that same side of the color wheel. You jump over to the other side of the color wheel for these apricots. And I like to use a satin stitch thread that will blend in really well with the overall applique piece. Let's look at this one over here, my Austin Skyline quilt. I started with that floral pop and then brought in lots of other greens and some purples that blended well with that fabric, some golds in there too. So we're all on that same side of the color wheel, plus then those little pops of purple and then the sweet little black and white animal accents. Here I did a lot more color than I often will do. Lots of these aquas, these mints, purples, pinks, and then in that tree I did those lots of creamy colors for the tree. And in the tree, I quilted with a wood grain motif, and the background, I quilted a bunch of my favorite poems, free motion, into that background. And that's how you do scrappy applique.